Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this conversation, which is HYPIA and the Hyperpolyglot Activist. I'm President HYPIA, Dr. Usman Chauhan, and today I have the pleasure of conversing with the now Senior Director of Research, Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez, and our purpose is to sort of celebrate his elevation, well deserved, and also to inaugurate basically HYPIA Research 2.0, because in this new capacity, Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez is going to take this agenda of HYPIA, a very important part of the hyperpolyglot community within HYPIA, to new heights in a new agenda. But we'll leave that to the description in our conversation. So first, I'm welcoming you, Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Usman Chauhan. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, well, the pleasure is all mine. So let's talk about this critical polyglot studies research agenda that is going to now gain fruition, take it to a new level. What are we doing here? Let's start with the intellectual origins. What are we talking about here? So you have spent decades working at the intersection of several things, language, identity, culture, and there's a point where you realize that the existing frameworks in sociolinguistics were not asking the right questions about polyglossia, something we have lived experience. So, what was that juncture where you realized that it wasn't the right stuff in the field?
Yes, indeed. So my research begins with the intersection between language learning, critical social linguistics, and activism. And I realized that there was a gap there between those three fields, in the sense that critical social linguists were rarely polyglots. Polyglots rarely had an awareness about critical social linguistics. And activists may or may not be polyglots and may or may not have an awareness as to critical social linguistics. So bringing those three together, I came up with the idea of critical polyglot studies, which, as I said, works at the intersection between critical social linguistics, hence the adjective critical, polyglossia, hence polyglot, and then academia, hence studies, with a view towards activism, towards making a real impact in the world out there. Hence the slogan of my initiative, the Hyperpolyglot Activists, learn languages, make a difference, right? And HYPIA Research operates at the intersection between the Hyperpolyglot Activist and HYPIA. And the core idea here is that polyglossia is not just a cognitive or neurological achievement. It's also a social and political fact with ideological and economic implications that haven't been discussed within critical social linguistics. Hence the need for a sub-academic discipline that we can term critical polyglot studies, and that corresponds with the title of our book.
It certainly does. I'll also remind the audience that there are videos of Dr. Carlos and myself conversing where we sort of planted the idea, and then the perfect triad described here between the activists, the practitioners, the day-to-day speakers, and the scholars. This is the triangulation that is attributable to Dr. Yebra Lopez. Now, let's say this field emerges. It has. What did you want Critical Polyglot Studies, CPS? What did you want it to achieve that other work had not done? So first we say, okay, we identified a gap. The solution we have presented, what is it that you wanted to do?
Mhm. Yes, so the first step is already accomplished, which was the publication of a seminal work, which is this book here, Critical Polyglot Studies, of which I'm sure you also have a
You mean
copy
this one?
somewhere. There you go. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And there we did, as you said, rightly, a section about diagnosis and a section concerning prognosis. The diagnosis came down to what we call the polyglot matrix and the polyglot industry and how they work in dialectical fashion. The polyglot matrix is the ensemble of assumptions about language learning, which are ideologically pernicious and empirically inadequate. And the polyglot industry is the ensemble of four sectors, meaning social media, language learning platforms, printed media, and language learning meetings, all of which have inbuilt assumptions about language learning and reproduce social inequalities and power inequalities. And so that's what we diagnose in the first part of the book. In the second part, we talk about the prognosis. What can we do about it? And we can intervene, and we have been intervening from the perspective of our own initiatives, the Hyperpolyglot Activist, my own initiative, and HYPIA, your own initiative. And then within HYPIA, we have an academic subsection, which is HYPIA Research.
Yeah,
We're
well, that
trying,
leads to the
yes,
next point, actually.
yes,
Let me add to before you build on it. Let me cut you through on that, which is now you're senior director at HYPIA, and you will have an intellectual home for this work on CPS. So take it from there. In this new
yes.
capacity, where are you taking it?
So we are doing at HYPIA is we have about 500 members, if I'm not mistaken. And so
Hmm.
we want a very select group of those members who are research inclined to partake in the academic subdiscipline of critical polyglot studies and take it to the next level. So what we need is for members to acquire the book. I didn't say purchase, it means acquire. It can be through a library, it can be by different means. To then do a research profile interview for HYPIA Research. People come to polyglossia from different fields, and all of them have a place in critical polyglot studies as long as they partake in this critical lens. And then create a research community called HYPIA Research Community, where we communicate privately. And that is the core of academic progress. People still have this romanticized idea that academic progress takes place through isolation and thinking very hard. And at the end of the day, the genius comes up with new, fresh ideas that then communicates to the masses. It doesn't work like that. It's the opposite. The golden standard of academic progress is peer review. And peer review means iron sharpens iron. It means we come together as a community, not just to chat casually, but to ask hard questions, deep analysis, and to refine our respective publications. And that's what we're going to do in HYPIA Research. We're going to advance our respective articles, book projects, etc., all of which have in common being rooted in critical polyglot studies.
Very good. So let's emphasize this point for the listeners, both within Hypia and outside, that what we care about here is in order to take Hypia research to the next level, we are grounding all of it in critical polyglot studies. And they may have ancillary projects, but again, it's this community now, the same ethos as Hypia as a whole, peer review, working on taking this research forward. Conference papers, working papers, journal articles, further books, all of that. But we take it from this step. You use the word seminal. So CPS, which we co-authored, is a seminal text. And all research has to proceed in this little subdomain from that seminal text. You can't have another seminal text. This is it. We want to take
Indeed.
it from there. This is what HYPIA Research 2.0 is. Can you confirm that and can you build on that vision?
Yes, and I want to clarify that this is different from fetishism of the book. The book comes because there was a gap identified. And so
Yes.
what matters is that people share this root idea that polyglossia is not just a cognitive achievement, but it's a social and political fact with ideological and economic implications. That's what we need everybody to agree on. The book comes after as a subproduct, and that's why people need to acquire it, because it systematizes that intuition and breaks it down in detail. So it's not really
Okay.
about the book per se, but about what the book represents, right? So
Hmm.
it doesn't matter whether the members of HYPIA Research 2.0 are independent scholars or they have an institutional affiliation or a university affiliation. What matters is that they are research inclined, that they understand that this is an ambitious and serious endeavor, and that research inclination intersects with a critical perspective on polyglossia as not only a cognitive achievement, but also a social and political fact with ideological and economic implications. That's all there is.
Right. So if that is the clarification, and we understand that the book is ancillary but important, then what
Mhm.
kind of work do we envisage? What work would you expect
Right.
to be done within
Right.
this?
Right. So there's a number of things that we are going to do, all of which come down to peer review, as I said. So based on peer review, we can advance individual projects, meaning, say you're writing an article about an endangered language in Guatemala, and you want to approach that from a critical perspective. Then you can join the group to just develop that article as part of our research agenda. It can be a book, it can be an abstract you're submitting for a conference. Those are individual projects that fit the individual research profiles of the members. Another thing we're going to do as a group is an annual conference, a Critical Polyglot Studies annual conference, from which we hope to extract proceedings that will then be published in an edited volume. That will be about critical polyglot studies with different case studies, but all rooted in that common framework. And then we can have individual consultations as well. So part of what makes us academic researchers is that we have a PhD training, an academic background. We've been here before. We've published several books. I think between both of us, around 15 to 20 books
Yeah,
in
probably.
most prestigious publishing houses such as Routledge. And therefore, we are in a position to offer tailor-made academic advice to those who have shown seriousness of purpose and ambition and drive to move the field forward. So it's a win-win situation.
So I take some key takeaways from this are that it's serious business. We have that training and we want to deploy that in the service of the critical approach to understanding polyglossia as well as linguistics issues. But there are some tangibles we are envisaging. One is a conference. This will be a
Yes.
big deal. And the proceedings of this should be of a requisite standard that we should then work on an edited volume. Like there's concrete
Yes.
stuff that people joining
Yes.
should be appreciative of. And the people joining, there's one important thing that we have been considering. It is your
Mhm.
idea about a founding cohort of researchers.
Yes.
Please tell us what the founding cohort idea is.
Indeed, this is very important. So here we need to strike a balance between quality and quantity. I said before that HYPIA membership currently is about 500 members. We aim
Mm.
for a founding cohort of up to 25 members, meaning in no way, shape, or form do we go above 25 members. It can be less, but it can be no more than 25 members. So if you think about it percentually, it is between 1% and 5% of the total HYPIA membership. We might
Mm.
go from 5 to 25 up to 25 for the first year. Afterwards, we need to see what the engagement level is, what the productivity is at, and then adjust accordingly. But the founding cohort will be anywhere between 5 and 25 members.
Wonderful. And this is a very good opportunity for those who are scholarly inclined and who would like to see their research outputs reviewed by dedicated people and see a new subfield emerge. That's a very cool thing. How often do you get to participate in something like that? It's very rare, especially in something in the humanities. If we were like engineers or something, that might be different, but it's very
Indeed.
different for
And
us.
it's also peer review that is nonetheless relatable. So oftentimes, and anybody who's working in academia knows this, peer review takes months, if not years, to come along, and then it is often anonymous, and therefore you have a cold relationship vis-a-vis that feedback, which might or may not have other incentives and biases, etc. Whereas
Mm.
if you receive feedback from people who want to get the best out of you, whom you already trust because you're already HYPIA members, you've known each other for months, if not years, then that creates a much more powerful community and team. And you can not produce intellectually or win research-wise alone. You need a team around you that has your best interests at heart and that has the know-how as well to go with it. And that's exactly what HYPIA Research is about.
Yes, and we can vouch for each other. You have given me feedback on previous work. I've given you feedback. For example, there was a chapter you contributed to a book on NFTs.
Mhm.
It's collegial and it's positive and it makes for better work. This is a spirit that we have to reinvigorate the academy with because it's really, like you said, frigid and it's nasty and their peer review is pretty awful if it's not done with the right intentions. And it's important that that will be part of fostering community because the values of community matter for IPA research, yes, and for IPA as a whole. Now let's talk about the wider implications of this. So, for example, there is the HYPIA element to HYPIA research, obviously, but then there's
Mhm.
the hyperpolyglot activist part to this too. So, the hyperpolyglot activist part, how do you see the public intellectual and the academic researcher and the activist all melding and informing each other? What's the THA, the hyperpolyglot activist angle to this work?
Yeah, so as I said before, the slogan of the Hyperpolyglot Activist is learn languages, make a difference. So HYPIA Research 2.0, which is the academic instantiation of that, by which I mean we're going to talk about learning languages, about polyglossia, hyperpolyglossia, etc., but we're going to talk about it from the lens of a critical perspective of how does learning languages help make a difference in the world. And that can take two shapes. That can be in the form of making a positive contribution or criticizing inequalities generated by polyglossia or hyperpolyglossia. So it can be deconstructive or it can be constructive in both ways. Yeah.
Well, so that was my next question was about the real world applications. People sometimes ask, and it's particularly hurtful in the humanities when they're like, well, how does this impact the real world? But with this critical polyglossia work, there are implications for language education, for immigration policy, for all of these other fields. Can you identify some of those? And if you
Exactly.
also, if you
Mhm.
had to, if I can just add to that, if you had to tell somebody who's a non-expert but very motivated, like a young person who's graduated in linguistics or something, how do you convey this to the real world people and to the student who's passionate?
Mhm. Yes, it all goes down to the difference between the polyglot matrix and the polyglot industry, which we discussed before. Anytime you are attacking an ideology or ideological unit or item of the polyglot matrix, that can be traced back to its operation within the polyglot industry, within one of these four sectors. For instance, if you think about the ideology that languages ought to be separated in autonomous, self-contained entities we call language, then you can just go to an app as simple as Duolingo and see that instantiated, right? Spanish is completely different from Portuguese, which is completely different from French, even though we know that distinction to be not as neat as that.
Mm.
If you go and criticize the language ideology that one language corresponds to one flag, otherwise known as flagism, then you can see that also instantiated in virtually in any language learning course that you take when you go to your local language learning meeting and people represent the languages that they speak through flags. So any critical and academic discussion has an instantiation in the real world that you can see almost immediately. And that's what makes this research so rewarding because there is no Marxist alienation here. You can see the end product of your work.
Wonderful. And let me just share a personal anecdote. A few hours ago, like 4 hours ago, I was at a reception held by an embassy, and I met a Pakistani
Mhm.
young lady who actually is, very talented with languages, would qualify for HYPIA. But all of the things that CPS has taught me, they all hit me like the accentism, the flagism, all of those, those ticks came in. And it shows me how much I have learned through this journey. CPS actually teaches you a lot about what is out there. And I realized that there's people who are so plugged into the matrix that I don't even know where to start. So, of course, there are those types of people who then want to remedy the situation and start lecturing. I didn't do that, but the ticks in my mind from how much I have learned through this process of
Yes.
seeing CPS
Yes.
develop, it's so valuable for me. But then it shows me that I've been wired out of the matrix, and there are
Yes.
people who are so embedded in it that it is really, really hurtful just to deal
And
with this.
yeah, it's something that you cannot unsee. Once you understand how languages work, you cannot possibly go back to your uncritical perspective from the Jahiliyyah times. And this is important because when we speak about ideologies, some people may have the assumption, may make the assumption that we're talking about something dark and bad intentioned, etc. But no, most of the ideology reproduction we criticize takes place through well-intended acts. I'm pretty sure the person you encountered today was a well-intended person. So are the people who post online and say, non-native speakers the same rights, deserve the same rights when they do a job application than native speakers. That is a well-intended statement, but it's still a factually wrong statement and ideologically pernicious one. Because in criticizing job market conditions rightly, you have reproduced the ideology that there are native speakers and non-native speakers, which has caused the problem to begin with. So
Yes.
that's another very important element.
No, it's well said. And the most painful thing about this is when you do encounter people who are so deeply embedded in the matrix, they may be well intentioned, like they're not evil people, but they're
Mhm.
so far back in the beginning of their journey that you don't even know where to start. And you have that 1,000-yard stare, the horror of just like there's so
Right.
much burden of knowledge. Is why we have
Yes.
to develop this. And
In
that's why there's an outreach element to this, that getting CPS across, building a team, let's get the scholarship out there, let's get the message out there. Like otherwise, a whole life will be spent interacting with people with the 1,000-yard stare. Like I don't even know where to begin to converse with people who
right.
have no
Yes.
idea about this.
Right. And that requires a lot of social calibration and pedagogical intent. Because if you go too far and start by saying, no, you don't know what you're talking about, listen, this is the truth, then it's not going to work. You have to lead them by the hand. And it's kind of always reminds me of chapter 7 of the Republic from Plato. There are people chained to the wall that are watching screen. How do you, upon coming from outside of the cave, convince these people that outside of the cave there's a different reality to which they have to get their eyes accustomed? Because otherwise it will hurt. Because the
There,
instinctive reaction, right, as Plato writes, is for those who are tied to the wall to try and kill the person who comes from the outside, because nobody likes to have their ego investments challenged, right? So,
Yes, and there's the one important thing that's dealt with in CPS, which matters here a lot, is that there's people who are invested in it, knowingly or unknowingly, right? So
yes,
you like the unknown knowns. You don't even know that you know it. That's ideology. There are people who are so invested in it that there isn't room for them to open up to this because their stakes are so deep in it. But those are the sorts of challenges we will have to grapple with in due course. Let me ask you a final question then.
Mhm.
If there's one thing about CPS that you want somebody to take away, what is that one thing?
CPS is the framework you need to make sense of what you do when you learn languages, why you do it, what you do it for, how you do it. And if you want to then understand the social and political roots of that activity and stop seeing it as something free floating that is just out there and is objective, then this is for you.
Marvelous. So with that, I think we have informed the audience that there is a HYPIA Research 2.0. It is serious business. We're going to take this far. Peer review is the basis of that. We will have many outputs out of this. Conference will be the big one, edited volume after that. There is a lot to develop based on a seminal text, but the idea is criticality in studying polyglossia. It's not just about the book. So I think there's a lot for us to take away.
Indeed.
And
And may I add that if this sounds like you and you want to join HYPIA Research 2.0, feel free to email me at contact@thehyperpolyglotactivist.com and we'll take it from there. We'll have a research profile for you, do an interview and see if you're a good fit, and inshallah you'll be able to join in due course.
inshallah, well, let's hope for that. We do want to have nice people working, like-minded people, or just critically minded people and open-minded people. And so with that, once again, I congratulate you, Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez, for your elevation to senior director. That was 5 years of dedicated service. And I am well known for picking the right people. That's my strongest quality. And I certainly, in this example, once again, pick the right person. So we will see more beautiful and important things come out of you in this new task. So with that, I think we conclude. Thanks everybody for listening to us. And please do follow the Hyperpolyglot Activist as well as the HYPIA channel. There's plenty more where this comes from.
Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chauhan. A pleasure as always, and congratulations on HYPIA once more. All right. So that's the detener grabación.